Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be covering the Widowmaker guide so that all of you can become the one-trick widow that you've always wanted to be. So with that, let's jump right into it. Now I'm going to divide this video up into 4 sections. So with section 1, let's get started with some settings that you need to know on Widowmaker. First, I want to start with her aim sensitivity. Now generally, lower is better on Widowmaker. Now a general recommendation that I would recommend is about 5 to 8% in-game, with a mouse sensitivity of about 800 DPI. Now this is going to give you a kind of slow aim, but still fast enough where you have plenty of mouse pad. But it's just going to make sure that you're not over flicking, you're not going crazy with your mouse. It's going to make you much more consistent with your shots, and it's a very good place to start. Now of course some of you are going to be used to much higher sensitivities and higher DPIs, and that's fine. Really just find what works for you. This is just a general recommendation to get you in a good range. Alright, now I want to talk about an in-game setting called Scoped Aim Sensitivity. Now when you set this to 38%, this is going to give you the same sensitivity as when you are not scoped in with the weapon. Now this is very helpful if you play other characters, as this will make sure that when you are scoped in, you have the same sensitivity across every character, across every weapon. I highly recommend this for everyone. Now if you have been playing Widow for a long time, you might have gotten used to the different sensitivity of being in scoped, and if that is the case, I would recommend just staying with what you're used to. But if you're new to Widow, I would highly recommend learning at 38%. Now, another in-game sensitivity is actually the grapple sensitivity. And the reason I changed this is at its default, the grapple kind of has a mind of its own. And I would recommend bumping this down to around 60%. And this is going to make sure that when you actually grapple, it's going to attach at the thing you're looking at. Because at the default, you can be looking at something and it'll grapple something way closer, about 10 feet away. It's just going to mess up your grapples and it's going to make it a nightmare to actually get where you want to go. So with this, it should be much easier to grapple, it's going to be much closer to your crosshair, and it's going to make it so that grapple doesn't have a mind of its own. So with that, we're going to move on to section 2. Alright, so to kick off section 2, we're going to talk about her weapon and her abilities. Now, I think it is best to think of Widow's gun as actually 2 separate guns combined into one. So we're going to refer to the sniper version of her gun as Weapon 1. Now, with Weapon 1, it has an effective damage range from 0 to 70 meters. That means as long as you're closer than 70 meters, you will not have any damage fall off. Now, the ideal range for Widow is 60 to 70. You want to keep it as far away from the enemy as possible. So you always want to kind of be in that 60 to 70 damage meter range, and you'll kind of be able to gauge that farther as you play the game more. And another thing about her weapon is it charges all the way from 0 to 100% power. Now, you do not have to be at a 100% power to one-shot enemies. Now the highest HP enemy that you can one-shot is actually a 250 HP character. Now to one-shot a 250 HP character, you have to charge her weapon to 82%. And it charges pretty rapidly. So what I would recommend is as you play, just try and get the timing down for how long it takes for that power to build. And eventually, you won't even have to look at the power gauge. You'll know by how long it's been since you pressed your right click, or if you're on controller, your left trigger, how long it's been, and then you can kind of make a rough estimate at what power you'll be at, and you won't have to look at the power bar percentage at all. You'll just be able to kind of know, like, okay, now I can fire and one-shot somebody. Now, here are the other breakdowns. For a 200 HP character, the most common HP for DPS, you only need 63%. Now this is a very fast charge time, and it's a lot faster than waiting all the way up to 100%. And this can be the difference between getting the kill or letting someone escape into cover. Now for our lower HP characters at the 150 range, you only need 45% power. That is an extremely fast charge time that you can get out multiple shots very rapidly. So with that, we're going to move on. And Widow's gun has a total ammo of 35. And in the sniper rifle version, she uses 5 ammunition per shot. Now, she does have a 2.5 headshot multiplier, and those damage values and the percentage values are based off headshots. If you only get body shots, you will not one-shot any character in the game. The 2.5 headshot multiplier is huge. You always want to be going for headshots. Worst case scenario, body shots are better than no damage, but you want to be going for those headshots. Widowmaker's second gun, the submachine gun, has an effective range of 0 to 20 meters, and the ideal range is around that 10 to 20 meter range. Now this weapon is honestly quite weak, and it's really only used to confirm kills up close. Now it has a 10 round per second fire rate with an ammunition count of 35. Now it also shares the 1.5 second reload animation with the sniper rifle version of this weapon. Now with this weapon, like I said, it's only going to be used to confirm close kills, and ideally you want to be able to get the sniper version powered shots off up close, as they're going to be much more reliable when facing your counters. So in all honesty, try and use this gun as little as possible. Overall, it can help you get out of a pinch, and it definitely can help you confirm up close kills. You know, if you get a body shot on a Genji or a Tracer, you can definitely use the submachine gun version to finish them off. So with that, we're going to start with her abilities. Now the first ability I want to have a look at is actually the grappling hook, as I think this is the most powerful ability that Widow has in her kit. Now it has a 12-second cooldown with a max range of 20 meters. Now the grappling hook can be used in a couple of different ways. Now the ideal way to use it is for positioning. The grappling hook is a great way to keep the enemy in your ideal range. You know, you want to be at that far end of 70 meters, but just within it, you know, that 60 to 70 Goldilocks zone. And the grappling hook's great at that. It's going to allow you to get up in the air, get some vertical height upon the enemies to make it easier for headshots, and it's also going to allow you to escape out of tricky situations. Now the grappling hook can also be used for what are called grapple shots. Now this is a more higher level mechanic that you'll see a lot of times in Masters and GM lobbies. Now the grapple shot is when you use the grappling hook to launch yourself into the air, then as you're falling back down, you can use your weapon to get a pretty easy one-tap headshot on a support or a low DPS. Now this is really strong for a couple of reasons, as not very many enemies are going to be expecting you to come flying up in the air and shoot them while you're falling. Not very many enemies are going to expect it, it's very hard to react to, and if you can get really good at grapple shots, it's a great way to get an advantage in those team fights that just seem to be stalemating. Now I do think this is the strongest ability in our kit. It takes a little bit to get used to, but with the adjustments we made in the settings, it makes it a lot easier to use, and overall isn't too hard to get the hang of. Now we're going to move on to the next item in her kit, which is the Venom Mine. Now the Venom Mine isn't bad by any means. I actually think it's a little bit underrated by the community. Now it has a cooldown of 15 seconds, and it can be placed on almost any surface on the map except shields or generated walls by characters like Symmetra. It has a 3 meter interact radius, and what happens is when the enemy steps within 3 meters of the mine, it's going to explode into a kind of a purple mist, and it's going to do 15 damage per second for a total of 75 damage. Now this damage can be stopped if the enemy that is affecting were to walk over a health pad. It will cancel out the effect and they will not take any more damage. Now a healer can heal them through this damage, it will not cancel it out, but most healers can out-heal the damage, making it not really that great for getting kills, but more as a way to mark your enemy. Because one of the main functions of the Venom Mine is that it actually highlights the enemy through walls. Now it will do this for 3 seconds, and it allows you to follow up and get a pretty quick headshot on anybody about to push through the wall. Now there's a few other ways you can use this Venom Mine. My favorite way is to actually use it for protection against rushing characters like Tracer, Genji, some of the tanks like Doomfist, and what you do is you place it at your feet wherever you're standing. Now how this works is if say a Genji was coming at you and they dash through you with their dash, they're going to trigger this Venom Mine, it's going to start ticking them for damage. Now usually when that happens, they're going to try and back up. Now this is going to give you space to collect yourself and hopefully manage to land a sniper one-shot kill on the Widow at close range. Now sometimes that's not always possible depending on what rank you are and the skill you have with her weapon. Now another option is let it tick for the 75 damage and don't let them escape, but instead use your submachine gun to try and finish them off. Because if most characters, a DPS character, takes 75 damage, you can finish them off with the submachine gun fairly consistently. Now I would recommend still using the sniper rifle as it is much more consistent, but you know, if you're a pinch lower ranks, you can definitely use the submachine gun to help you out in those sticky situations. Now a cool thing that happens with the Venom Mine is you can actually have more than one on the field. So how this works is you can place one at your feet, and then you can throw your next one out into like a choke point, you know, somewhere the enemy's going to walk through, they're going to hit it. Now you do have to be careful because the Venom Mine only has 1 health, so it can very easily be destroyed. So that pretty much wraps it up for the Venom Mine. I do think it's an underrated ability and it's definitely not bad, and it definitely can help you in a sticky situation. Next, I want to talk about the last item in Widow's kit, and that is actually her ultimate ability. This is actually a map-wide ultimate and has a duration of 15 seconds. And what this allows you to do is see the enemy's location through walls. And not just you, but your entire team can see where the enemy is at all times for 15 seconds across the entire map. Now, the ult does end if you die as Widowmaker, but this is really useful and it has a couple different ways that you should really be using it. So you don't want to use Widowmaker's ult if the team fight is about to end. You know, if you're winning or you're about to lose the team fight, you should instead hold on to her ult. Now, the ideal situation to use her ult is right as the team fight has initiated. So it's too late for the enemy to back up and wait for the ult to be over, and it also isn't about to end. You don't want to use it right before a team fight because the enemy can just back up, wait 15 seconds, and then, push in. Now this can really help win team fights. I know it doesn't do anything, to lower their health, lower their HP, lower their resistance, anything like that, but it makes it a lot easier for your characters to recognize flanks, to know who's pushing, when they're pushing, and to be ready. Overall, it definitely can help win a team fight, and it's a fairly fast charging ult, and there's not any reason to hold it. So when you see a good window of opportunity, make sure to pop that ult and start charging the next one. So that is going to wrap it up for section 2, and we're going to move on to section 3. Alright, so in this section, we're going to be talking about the game plan and strategy of playing Widowmaker. Now first off, I want to start with positioning. Now like I said earlier, you really want to be positioned at the far end of her range, just within it. Now this is just going to make sure it's going to give you the most safety and the most reliability with the character, because you with your scope can look out and hit those far ranges where other characters are going to struggle to hit you, and it's going to take time for those rushers to get to you, and you can use that time to reposition and counter them. Now the biggest thing with positioning is staying in range as the fight progresses. Say you're attacking a point, the enemy's backing up, you have to be moving slowly with your team to stay within that 70-meter range. Because it's very easy for them to get outside of your 70-meter range, then you're going to be much less effective as you're going to be doing much less damage. Now the biggest thing with Widow, in my opinion, is making sure that you are not just peeking one angle for the entire game. Now what I mean by this is, there's several spots on different maps that are obviously made for Widowmakers, but you don't just want to stay at them the whole game. So what you want to do is go to a really good spot. Usually it's an elevated spot, makes it easier to get headshots, kind of shooting down on the enemy. And what you want to do is maybe fire 3 or 4 shots, get 1 or 2 kills, and then reposition. This is going to make it so the enemy team has a much harder time finding you and countering you. If they don't know where you are, they don't know where to pre-aim, they don't know where to be looking, and it's much harder for them to protect their healers and their weaker DPS characters. Now, one problem I do see Widowmaker players making all the time is not doing any damage to the tank. So say they have a good tank like a Reinhardt or a Diva or something like that. As soon as they drop their defense matrix or their shield, you should be helping damage the tank. Now obviously you want to focus the support healers first and any DPS that are targeting you, but if you notice that your team's struggling to get their tank down, of course help them. Widow can do insane damage to tanks and usually can take them down to half health with 1 shot. Now this will really help your team get through those choke points, break down their defenses, and capture a point or move a payload. Now another positioning tip that I would give is to avoid close range contact at all costs. So a good Widow player can take on close range engagements and win fairly often, but that is not where we are the strongest, and many characters have the advantage at closer ranges. So what we want to do is use our grapple, use our map knowledge to get away from those characters and contact them at a farther range. We'll have a much higher success ratio in our 1v1s, and overall is going to make Widow a much stronger character by not taking on those close range contacts and engagements. Now, something that's going to happen when you play Widow is people are going to counter you. It's going to happen. Widowmaker is an extremely strong character that has the potential to completely change the outcome of a game. And when you have a character that strong, the other team is going to try and counter you, especially if you are popping off on Widow and getting those kills and breaking down their defenses. Now, what happens when they counter you? Well, there's a few things you can do. The main thing I recommend is that you stay on Widow, and even if you lose those fights, get experience dealing with your counters. Because if you practice enough, against your counters on Diva, you can actually start to win those. And then if you can't be countered, you are just a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, and no one's going to be able to beat you, and you are going to be able to climb ranks much, much faster. So I highly recommend don't switch off Widow. Now this rolls into our next section of the strategy and game plan section, and that is the mindset of playing Widowmaker. And the main mindset is that don't be discouraged if things aren't going well. Widowmaker takes a ton of time to learn, and it is not an easy character. But with such a high skill ceiling, Widowmaker can be absolutely amazing if you give it the time and really put in the effort. Now, it can be hard not to get discouraged, and what I would recommend, first off, is just ignore the haters. You know, you're going to be going into games, and maybe the first round, you're not doing great, and people on your team are going to be like, hey, switch, you know, you're throwing, you're doing bad. Just ignore them, because all it takes is you to pop off one round to completely turn the game around. Now, one thing, like say you're new at Widow and you don't want to lose your rank or go down any, one thing I really recommend is making an account just to play Widow on, a Widow only account. Now on this, you're going to go through, get your 50 quick play wins and then go into competitive and just play Widow. Care less about your rank, just focus on doing good on Widow. Don't pay any attention to your team. Like, don't pay any attention to the negative aspects of your team. I'm not saying ignore your team, but go in there and just try and do good on Widow. Focus on yourself. If they try and counter you, stay on Widow. I mean, this is your Widow only account. Who cares if they counter you? Get better at countering them. So what you can do, just practice like that. Don't get discouraged. And once you get good at beating your counters, you will instantly notice that you're going to rise to the ranks much, much faster. I mean, with Widow, consistency is key, and consistency takes time to build, and it's just going to take time for you to get good at Widow. Don't get discouraged and just stick with it, and I promise you'll be glad that you did. So that's going to wrap up section 3. We'll get on to section 4. All right, so our final section is going to be aim training, which I know many of you were looking forward to, as aiming is the fundamental skill needed for Widowmakers. Now, first and foremost, I would not recommend using any outside resources like aim labs. They're not going to recreate how Widow feels in-game, and I just don't recommend them. I don't think they're going to help you get better. For other games, they can be useful, but for Overwatch, I just don't see the point in using a third-party program like that. Now, of course, I think the best training is actually just going into ranked and playing Widow. Now, say you're spending, 10 hours a week in ranked. Try and spend at least 6 to 7 of those hours on Widow, because if you're not playing Widow, you're not going to get better. Widow is one of those characters that it just takes hours and hours to finally get good at and drill in that muscle memory into your brain to practice those flicks and to get better at. Now, a great way to do this is to make a Widow only account. Like I said, that is probably my #1 tip that I would give for someone who really wants to get serious as Widow. Is just make that account, play it on it all the time, and once you feel comfortable, go onto your main account and play Widow, because then you'll be good. Make sure you have the same settings, everything's the same. And then you can switch onto your main, and you don't have to worry about losing rank, and you can actually start moving up in the ranks. Widow is a great character to carry on and a great character to move up in the ranks. Now, this tip was a little controversial in my last video, and that is using training bots in custom games. Now, with a caveat at this, in my last video, I suggested using them to practice aiming. Now, after talking to some friends at the same rank as I, and some other people that compete higher up into the pro leagues, they do agree that the bots are useful, but not for training. Now, how I would recommend using the bots in custom games is to warm up. Go into the custom map and just throw in some bots and just practice, for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, just warming up, getting your hand warmed up, and then go into competitive. Now, in my experience, this is going to make you much more consistent. It takes about that 5 to 15 minutes to get really warmed up and get your coordination down. So I really highly recommend that. Now, spend the majority of your time playing Widow. That's how you're going to succeed, and that's how you're going to get better. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, I do want to thank you for sticking to the very end. I appreciate everyone who watches this. And if you like this, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can keep making guides like this for every character in Overwatch 2. So with that, I will see all of you in the next video, and I hope you guys have a great day.